Betsy Hill swears that if her three sons weren't brothers, they would never have met. With all three being so different, it's no wonder their paths through education were as unique as their personalities.
They each had learning strengths. They were very bright, but in very different ways. I remember my oldest basically would do his work often, but forget to turn it in. And so when he was in high school, he got A's or D's, and he didn't understand why I thought there was a difference. As long as he was passing, that was good. He was good with that. And the point is, if he was really into it, he was doing really well, and otherwise he was doing just enough to get by.
Hill says her other two boys showed similar habits, leaning into their assets while ignoring any weaknesses. As a longtime teacher, she knew these student behaviors well, and that they weren't actually conducive to learning. However, Hill didn't yet have the knowledge of how to find and cultivate both the strengths and weaknesses of each child.
I taught high school for a number of years. I've taught at virtually every level. Today, I teach in a graduate school program. But I didn't have anything in my toolbox. I did not know. We couldn't look inside kids' brains. We still don't really look inside their brains, but we have ways that we can understand much more about how they learn and how to help them use their strengths to support their learning.
The National Center for Education Statistics 2016 International Reading Comparison evaluated the reading literacy of fourth graders. The U.S. ranked 16th out of 58 education systems from around the world. We fell behind countries such as Russia, China, and England. Unfortunately, the NCES reports that in 2022, the average reading scores declined at both 4th and 8th grade, with 8th grade recording the lowest score since 1998.
There are so many kids who struggle with learning in America these days, and one of the statistics that really underscores this is that there are only about 35% of fourth graders who are reading proficiently at grade level. So the majority of kids are not performing at grade level, and sometimes very much below that.
But with more than $76 billion budgeted to the Department of Education in 2022, why aren't our kids finding success? Hill says part of the issue is that we have a one-size-fits-all approach to education, which is detailed in her new book, Your Child Learns Differently, Now What? The Truth for Parents. She and her co-author, Roger Stark, explain how focusing on cognitive skills can set students up for success.
These are the processes that our brains use to take in, store, retrieve, organize, use information. And we used to think that those were sort of fixed, but they're not. We can actually develop those and change those and become stronger at them. And so when we do that, we can help kids become much more capable, confident learners.
With an emphasis on learning. Dr. Stephen Koslin, the founder and president of Active Learning Sciences, says our education system has incorrectly assumed a great teaching plan is the biggest factor of success.
A lot of people do think of education as about teaching, but I think they'd be better off thinking about it as learning. Because learning is about what the students actually take away from it. I mean, what you want is for the students to have achieved certain learning objectives. You want the professor, instructor, to figure out what the goals are, what the students should be acquiring, grasping, be able to use, and design the educational experience with that in mind. So it's not just about lectures. A lot of it should be active learning, where they get some information, they do something with it, they use it in some way so that they'll actually learn it.
Unfortunately, Hill says her own teaching degree was built upon lesson planning and preparation programs instead of concentrating on how the student will best understand the material. She was taught how to structure classes and create assignments.
And it doesn't necessarily focus on how kids learn or on the learning outcomes themselves. And so the assumption is that kids come to the classroom prepared to learn, that they have all the skills that they need, and then all you need to do is sort of present the material in some kind of logical way, and they will get it. Well, if there are teachers out there listening to this, they're probably shaking their heads and going, doesn't work that way. There's so many kids who just aren't getting it the way that it's being presented.
And when a student is struggling, Hill says there's often an underlying learning issue that, she argues, usually involves their cognitive skills. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Psychology discovered that strong cognitive abilities have a significant impact on comprehensive academic performance.
In fact, cognitive skills account for 50% of academic outcomes, more than any other factor. And so when we were taught, when I was in my master's program, it was about if you do a good job of teaching, that's sort of going to take care of it. But that actually accounts for a fairly small percentage of it. And the individual students' capacities in each of these areas actually together account for, as I said, 50% of those academic outcomes. So we really need to address these underlying skills in order to help students be good learners.
Hill says the current classroom accommodations are only short-term solutions. Giving children extra time on tests is great, but she believes we should also be helping students strengthen their cognitive skills. For example, instead of only accommodating a child's short attention span by giving one instruction at a time, you also focus on improving their working memory.
We can help build attention skills so that they can stay focused more extended periods of time. Visually processing things so that things make sense, integrating visual and auditory information so that it's just much more integrated, makes more sense, it's just there. Our brains can work more efficiently.
Hill is the president of Brainware Learning Company, which offers tools to help build cognitive skills. One program they use has embedded a training program into video game technology. However, Hill says these skills can also be built at home, where parents can weave the exercises into everyday life.
For working memory, if you're listening to something on the radio, you're driving in the car, or you see a movie, or you're watching a television show even at home, stop it for a moment and say, what happened there? We can play dumb as parents. It's really great. It's a lot of fun. And then the kids think, of course, that they're smarter than we are, which they probably are. And then they can tell you what happened, or they can repeat what somebody said. Or if you're out and you meet a friend and you introduce them, afterwards you say, what was that person's name?
Memory games that seem like a fun activity to the kids, but are also developing really important learning skills. But even with students strengthening their own abilities, that's only half of the solution. Schools and teachers also have to make a shift in how they approach a classroom. In an effort to change education's focus back to learning, Coslin has created multiple curricula that reimagine how a classroom operates.
On the content end, we're very much learning objective driven. So as opposed to learning outcomes. So learning objectives are defined at different levels of scales. For the whole course, we think about how someone's going to be transformed in a big picture way. And then we break down that idea into a set of course learning objectives. There's usually 3 to 6 of them, which are things that we want the faculty, the instructor, to really convey.
Each of those objectives becomes a unit in the course, which is then broken down into smaller, short-term learning goals.
The reason learning objectives are so important is because they direct the instructor what to highlight, what to focus on, and what to measure. So they convey certain information, they have active learning where the students actually use that information in some way, and you know what it is they should be learning, and that can be measured at the end. So it's all designed to achieve certain goals.
As Coslin mentioned, the foundation of his curricula is based in the idea of active learning. It's a technique he believes is underutilized in education today.
Active learning is one good example where you have people use information they've given to some end, so it's going to stick, and you help them figure out how to transfer it, how to take what they learn in class and be able to use it in their real lives and on jobs.
For example, if a lesson plan focuses on effective communication, Coslin's end goal is for students to learn how to identify their audience and speak to their interests.
But we wouldn't just give them a lecture and expect them passively to sit there and absorb it. We would give them some information and then have them go into small groups where they debate it, or they use it solving some kind of problem, or there's some kind of role-playing game. They do something where they have to actually think about it and process it deeply. And then we would assess how well they actually grasp it after the fact.
While making changes to our education system may seem like a long, daunting process, Coslin says some strategies, such as active learning, are fairly simple to implement.
Faculty, instructors have to be willing to do something different from the way they were taught. And they have to be willing to kind of look at what the literature shows in terms of what's effective and what isn't. There's quite an extensive literature now on how to do active learning. It's not that hard to implement.
And just like active learning can help improve educational outcomes, Hill believes having students take cognitive assessments can give teachers a much better idea of how to personalize instructions to help their students be successful.
If they had the information that can come from a cognitive assessment and knew where their students' strengths and weaknesses are, they could do a much better job of adapting.
Brainware offers a free cognitive rating scale on their website, mybrainware.com. Hill's book, Your Child Learns Differently, is available for pre-order on Amazon. For more information about Betsy Hill, Dr. Stephen Coslin, and all our guests, visit radiohealthjournal.org. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farah. I'm Reed Pence. This segment was brought to you by the Capital One Venture X card. Earn 10x miles on hotels and rental cars and 5x miles on flights when you book through Capital One Travel, plus 2x miles on all other purchases. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
It is literally the most important, powerful breakthrough in identifying both the guilty and the innocent since the advent of fingerprints.
How your DNA can help catch serial killers.
Then discrimination within the medical community toward disabled parents.
He didn't think that I should be a parent. And I believed him because I think we are really taught to believe medical professionals. And I felt a lot of shame and vulnerable in that moment.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
I'm Nancy Benson, host of Radio Health Journal. If you enjoy listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
The best human solvers are still better than the best artificial intelligence solvers, too.
Long before Wordle, there was the crossword. Then,
it's not just somebody angry at a school board meeting. It's how maybe an entire set of school librarians in one school district are afraid of going to jail, so they're going to remove whatever books might get them in trouble.
The growing movement to ban controversial books. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Viewpoints on your favorite radio station and subscribe and listen to shows anytime on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.